Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going with a dark, cinematic aesthetic, a real Game of Thrones style, right? Because we're pulling out the magnifying glass to look at one of the absolute greatest character dynamics in television history. We're going to deconstruct those legendary encounters between Tywin Lannister and Arya Stark at Harrenhal. We'll explore the hidden depths, that crazy unspoken tension, and the total masterclass in character writing that makes these scenes just completely unforgettable. Okay, let's dive right into this. Anyone can be killed. Man, it's such a chilling, iconic line. I wanted to use this as our cold open to instantly drop you right into that high-stakes, suffocating atmosphere of Harrenhal. Because, this isn't just a passing comment. It's a declaration made right in the belly of the beast. It really sets the tone for everything we're about to analyze. Literally every conversation these two have is this delicate, high-wire act where one wrong word means instant death. Now, the absolute engine driving the tension in these scenes relies heavily on dramatic irony. That's basically the fact that we, the viewers, have a crucial piece of information that the characters completely miss. Think about it. Tywin Lannister is unknowingly sharing a room, a table, and his most private thoughts with the daughter of his sworn enemy. He's actively plotting to wipe out the Stark family, completely unaware that a Stark is literally the one pouring his wine. What makes this dynamic even more mind-blowing is that this masterclass in tension, it never actually happened in the original books. George R.R. Martin originally had Arya serving Roose Bolton, who, let's be honest, is a totally different, much quieter brand of terrifying. So the decision to pair her with Tywin Lannister instead was a brilliant pivot by the showrunners, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. They took the foundation of Harrenhal and created a collision of characters so phenomenal that it's famously George R.R. Martin's absolute favorite original addition to the show. How cool is that? To really appreciate the gravity of this meeting, let's just briefly zoom out and contextualize the war. Following the absolute trauma of her father Ned's execution, Arya barely escapes King's Landing. But her freedom? Super short-lived. She's captured on the road by Lannister soldiers and dragged straight to Harrenhal. Concurrently, Tywin is waging his campaign in the Riverlands against her brother, Robb, and he decides to make Harrenhal his base of operations. So the war literally drags these two wildly unlikely characters right into each other's orbit. Section 1. The Secret of Tywin's Power. Now, what's really interesting here is that to understand why these scenes crackle with so much energy, we first have to understand exactly why Tywin is widely considered the most dangerous man in all of Westeros. It's not just about armies or gold, right? It's about how his mind works. Let's look at his very first interaction with Arya. The second he lays eyes on her among the prisoners, he spots what his own soldiers completely missed. This one's a girl, you idiot, dressed as a boy. His instant observation of her disguise reveals that terrifyingly sharp intellect. Nothing gets past him. But notice his follow-up thought. Safer to travel. Smart. He doesn't just observe. He instantly gets the logic and respects the intelligence behind her survival tactic. See, Tywin's immense power doesn't just rely on ruling through fear or cheap manipulation. It rests on his supreme pragmatism and a really deep respect for competence. As he points out to his men, they just can't afford to discard able young bodies and skilled laborers, even if those bodies belong to the enemy. He outright refuses to waste useful potential. This cold, absolute pragmatism is exactly why he's perpetually one step ahead of everyone else in the Seven Kingdoms. Section 2. Arya's Battle of Identity.
But hey, these scenes are a two-way street. Long before Arya heads over to Braavos and gets beaten with a stick while being asked, "Who are you?" she's already completely failing the test of trying to become no one. Her true nature just won't stay buried. Literally everything she does betrays her disguise. Her unyielding sharpness, her unusually defiant tone for a servant, her advanced reading ability, and her super-specific historical knowledge of Visenya's Valyrian steel sword. She even incorrectly and honestly, kind of hilariously, uses the highborn "my lord" instead of the commoner's "me lord." Tywin even picks up on the fact that she's clearly never been underfed a day in her life. The undeniable traits of Arya Stark just bleed right through the facade every single time she opens her mouth.
Section 3. Turning the Tables. So all this mounting tension leads us right to the climax of their dialogue, that famous confrontation over the growing myth of the young wolf, Robb Stark, who is currently just tearing through Tywin's armies. Let's rewind the tape just a bit to fully grasp this exchange. Tywin is actually using Arya as a prop here. He's been lecturing his war council about underestimating Robb, teaching his lords this whole lesson about public perception and how the myth of a leader can actually be way more dangerous than their army. So he turns to the lowest person in the room, his cupbearer, to prove just how far this myth has spread. When he asks her, "Do you believe them?" he's fully expecting a peasant's superstitious answer. But her answer? "No, my lord. anyone can be killed. Now, I want to ask you directly, is this just a subtle threat? Well, at first glance, yeah, for sure. But it's actually so much more than that. Arya masterfully flips Tywin's lesson entirely on its head. Right in front of his own war council, the seemingly weakest person in the room subtly reminds the most powerful man in the room that he is absolutely not untouchable. She uses his own lesson about mortality against him, and wow, the heavy silence that follows is just deafening. Section 4. Cruelty, calculation, and tenderness.
And this brilliantly illustrates something else. Once Tywin realizes she isn't who she claims to be, every single interaction becomes a test. It lets us see these conflicting sides of a man who's usually just this monolith of cold authority. In the exact same scene, on a macro level, Tywin ruthlessly orders the burning of Riverland villages, a completely tactical decision that will unquestionably doom thousands of innocent children to starve. Yet in the very next breath, on a micro level, he displays this bizarre indulgence. He playfully shares his own untouched mutton with his young cupbearer. He is simultaneously a monster of war and a strangely observant, almost fatherly figure.
Which brings us to a really haunting question. Was that kindness or calculation? Because remember, mere moments before he hands Arya his food, he was discussing an assassination attempt on his life using a rare poison called wolfsbane. So when he slides his plate over to her and insists she eat, we are left dangling in this super unsettling uncertainty. Is he showing a rare moment of tenderness to a clever kid he actually respects? Or is he simply, coldly, using her as a disposable poison taster? The absolute genius here is that with Tywin Lannister, it is completely plausible either way. Section 5. A Masterclass in Acting. Now, the script is phenomenal, no doubt, but it's the invisible electricity between Charles Dance and Maisie Williams that really elevates this material from just a great scene to an iconic piece of television history. Dance does so much with so little, a steady, quiet voice, these measured glances. He just radiates an intimidating authority without ever actually having to shout. And opposite him, you have Maisie Williams. She was incredibly young at the time, but she goes totally toe-to-toe with a seasoned British theater veteran. She expertly balances these youthful, nervous glances with sudden, sharp bursts of stark defiance. Their chemistry forces us into this really complex viewing experience. We actually find ourselves admiring Tywin's intellect while simultaneously desperately rooting for Arya to survive. This mutual respect eventually culminates in Tywin's elegant confrontation where he finally exposes her highborn status. He notices she actively chose to read the history of the greater and lesser houses. Now, no commoner would ever care about a book like that. So when he tells her, "You are too smart for your own good," he isn't shouting, he isn't punishing her. He's actually almost delighted. He's seen this endless parade of fools in his life, and right here is a child who can actually match his mind. He playfully, yet incredibly dangerously, becomes a partner in her little game of survival. So the crucial point is, ultimately the story didn't change, but our perception did. Think about it. Tywin never actually learns her true name, and Arya never gets the chance to kill him at Harrenhal. Plot-wise, the grand narrative of the whole war remains pretty much unaffected by these specific conversations. But the magic of these scenes? It lies in how they let us rediscover already established characters in a completely new light. They deepen our understanding of Tywin's terrifying competence, and of course, Arya's absolutely unbreakable spirit. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If the most powerful, observant, and calculating man in all of Westeros couldn't see the young wolf hiding right there in his own hall, pouring his own wine, what else are we missing right in front of us? Thank you so much for exploring this with me in today's Explainer. I really hope this encourages you to keep analyzing, to keep looking closer, and to uncover the hidden depths of your favorite scenes. Until next time, stay curious.